And so with that, I just want to introduce Carol Kaufman and Rebecca Paulson. They're with the New River Valley chapter of the Virginia Master Naturalists, and they're going to talk about living with black bears in Virginia.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. As she said, my name is Carol Kaufman. Rebecca Paulson is here today. She's going to be doing part of the presentation today, and Rosemary Sawden is another individual member of our chapter who is part of our bear project, which is 29 members strong. There's a lot of interest in black bears in this area. And thank you very much for inviting us to do this presentation. This is actually our inaugural presentation for the program. We just started and received our training from the Department of Wildlife Resources just last month. We are one of 10 chapters across the state of Virginia that is partnering with the Department of Wildlife Resources to bring this educational outreach program to our communities. And one of the big reasons that we're doing it is there seems to be, a lot of bear activity in this area. There's a lot of interest in bears themselves. And what we want to do is educate you on some of the characteristics of bears, how large the population is in this area, and also what you can do to make a difference with the bears. There's human and bear conflict that what we're trying to do is reduce by education. And as I said, we've got quite a few handouts here that have been supplied by the Department of Wildlife Resources to help you be bear wise. And Rebecca's going to be talking a lot about the human-bear conflict part. If you have any questions, we're asking if you could please keep those to the end of the presentation. And if you're on Zoom, if you could just put them in the chat. And then I think, Anne, you're going to be moderating those questions, okay? One other thing before I start, whenever you came in the door, if you didn't receive one, we want to make sure that you get a copy of a pre-survey and a post-survey. The Department of Wildlife Resources is asking us to basically poll the people that come to these presentations to determine what their knowledge of bears and what kind of practices they do in their own homes or neighborhoods. And after the presentation, what they've learned. So if you can help us by filling those out, that would be great. And if we do come to the end, we have to leave, or we have to end at 1 o'clock. If you have questions that we aren't able to answer or we didn't get to, you can write them down on that post survey and put your email address, and one of us will get back in touch with you to answer those questions. Okay? All right, let's get started. I'm going to be referring to the Department of Wildlife Resources as DWR. It's a lot easier and quicker. So what we're going to cover today, first of all, we're going to start with a few bear basics, a little bit about bear biology. We're going to talk about the population distribution of bears across the state of Virginia and what their habitat requirements are. Then I'm going to talk about the bear management plan that the Department of Wildlife Resources uses. And then finally, as I said, I'll turn it over to Rebecca, and she'll be covering the human-bear conflicts and what you can do to help us keep bears wild. So first question, this is pretty easy considering we have a banner that says so, but what kind of bears are in Virginia? Anybody want to just? Black bears. That's right. The reason they put this slide in here is, believe it or not, they did a survey of adults in Virginia, and over 60% didn't get this answer right. Some of them said, somebody's laughing. Some of them said grizzly bears, which, okay, but people also said polar bears. So we don't have any polar bears. We don't have any polar bears in Virginia. Black bears are our native species. Black bears also are not necessarily just black. They come in a variety of colors, although in this particular area of Virginia, it's predominantly black. We do see some cinnamon bears, which are up in the upper left-hand corner here of the photo, and then also some of the brown-faced bears. I've seen cinnamon bears in the Grand Tetons, so they're mostly in the western states. in the United States. But there's also, anybody ever hear of a spirit bear? Yeah, pretty cool, huh? They're white. Not all of them, not all of the commode bears are white, but about 20% of them are. So there was a special feature in National Geographic about them. And then they even have blue bears. I've never seen one of these. It's a glacier bear, predominantly in the southeastern Alaska area and up in the Yukon and British Columbia. Okay, so a little bit about black bear history. Black bears are a native species to Virginia, and before European settlement, they were found all over the state of Virginia, very plentiful. But with unregulated hunting, they were hunted almost to extirpation, which basically means they were almost extinct in the state of Virginia. There were remnant populations in the Dismal Swamp area, which is in the southeastern part of the state, and also some of the more mountainous areas of the western part of the state. Still had some bears, but for the most part, they were almost exterminated. Until the Game Commission was formed in 1916, that gave the bears some protection. And there was also some other factors involved, like reforestation, habitat improvements and protection. And the bears have actually become quite a conservation success story in the state of Virginia. Now you can find them, basically, they've made a remarkable comeback. They started listing them as a game species again in 1930. Then there's been hunting seasons every year since, and the population has absolutely rebounded. Whoops, I'm going to do some calculations here. Okay, so the current bear range in Virginia, as you can see, if you live in Virginia, you're in bear country. Every county in the state of Virginia has some degree of bears. And even the eastern shore side, there's also some occasional sightings, although they're rare. Bears have been seen as far east as the eastern shore. So they're really all over. Habitat requirements, just like most wildlife, they need the basics: food, water, escape cover, and also den sites. And den sites can be anything from a hollowed out tree. Some of them actually have dens in trees. They're very much a tree climber species. They can also make dens in underbrush and where fallen trees are, and even out in the open in the grassy areas. They dig themselves a little trench, basically, and they can have a den site there. So basically, you can find a den site in many different areas in Virginia. A variety of habitat types is also very important, and that includes combinations of mast-producing trees. Does anybody know what mast refers to? Yeah.
Oh, you're a big thing, yeah. That's when not just the same oak tree, but all oak trees produce like vastly larger quantities of acorns than ordinary occurs in 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Give a mast cycle.
Right, exactly. So mast is either hard or soft, and hard mast are things like acorns, hickory nuts, beech nuts, all of that hard matter that falls to the ground, and bears love that. That's like their primary source of food in the wild. And soft mast would be things like herbaceous flowering plants called forbs. It can also be blackberries, blueberries, all types of berries. They like autumn olive, which too bad they can't eradicate it, but they do like the seeds, and same with serviceberry. So that's part of the habitat. Anywhere there's mass-producing trees is very important to the bears. Also, early successional stages or habitats, and that basically means if the forest has been used for timber management and some of that growth has been cut down, the new growth coming up, the green growth that comes up is very, very nutritious for the bears. They also like streamside areas, management zones, and wildlife clearings. So what do bears eat? You know, it's really amazing for the size of a bear and how big they can get, that 75% of their diet is actually vegetative matter. And again, just as we talked about, it's berries, nuts, grasses, fruits, and only 25% consists of insects, They love termites, ants, bee larvae. I hope we don't have any necessarily beekeepers here because they love to get into beehives. Small animals and fish. In the springtime, it was interesting to hear that two of their favorite foods are skunk cabbage and May apples, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't know that a bear would be interested in those items. And although they're not particularly good hunters, some bears may prey on small mammals such as rodents and deer fawns. And they're very opportunistic, as everybody knows. How many here have had a bear in their yard or on their property? Oh my gosh, okay. All right. Yeah, and the rodents and the deer fawns aren't obviously a preferred food source, but they're opportunistic. And in the spring, whenever the fawns are dropped, if they're laying in a field and a bear comes along, it might be an opportunity for them to have an easy meal. Okay. Fall is probably one of the most important times. Besides spring, the bears are out now. They're all very hungry. They're trying to find natural foods, and it's tough at this time of year. But the importance of fall foods is absolutely critical. Has anybody heard the term hyperphagia before? What that basically means is they go into a state of extreme food, what's the word? They're trying to find as much food as possible, okay? Because they need to be able to survive in their dens over an extended period of time, particularly the females who give birth to their cubs during the winter time. So they might gain more than 2 pounds a day just eating everything that they possibly can. They need the high energy foods with high carbohydrates so that they can put on weight. And again, the most important food for them in the fall are acorns. Now, we learned from the DWR that this past fall was not a good year for white oak acorns. And so that also tends to increase the activity of the bears coming into the city, into the urban areas, because of the fact that they're looking for food and some of their natural food is not as readily available. But in a good mast year, bears can more than double their body weight between August and December. So it's really a feeding frenzy at that time of year. In a bad mast year, as I said, it increases activity near humans and their communities, and it also can affect their reproduction. I thought this was such an interesting fact about bears, is that a female bear, even though they mate in the summertime, that egg, even though it's fertilized, does not implant until the fall. And if that female bear does not gain enough weight to be able to sustain itself and its cubs, it gets reabsorbed into the female's body, and then she doesn't stay pregnant, which I think is really amazing. And then they're born in like the January, early February timeframe, and they're like a half a pound in size, which is just incredible to me that a bear, an animal that size can be that small at birth and grow so quickly. So fall foods, very, very important. I love this picture because this kind of typifies why I love bears so much. They are extremely intelligent. They are resourceful. They are acrobats, and they are determined and persistent, which is one of the reasons why they do become a problem. And you wouldn't think that this bear, with as heavy as he is, would be able to reach that bird feeder, but sure enough, he did. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to talk about the bear management plan and how they manage the populations across Virginia. So black bears occur all up and down the East Coast. They're in every state with the exception of Delaware and Rhode Island. And the largest bear populations within Virginia, they reside in this area, this darkened area over here. So that would be Bath, Allegheny, and the Highlands counties. We're not too far behind. You know, the New River Valley, besides Roanoke, the New River Valley also has a fairly large concentration of bears. And as it says, the largest populations still occur in the Great Dismal Swamp on the southeastern side, that's down over here, and the Blue Ridge Mountains and Allegheny Mountains. So as the previous slide showed, they're all over the state of Virginia. They can be found. So this is an interesting topic, is how they manage the population of bears in Virginia. And their population objectives are set in this document, which is called the Virginia Bear Management Plan. This is a plan that takes the feedback and of all of the shareholders across the state. It's not just the Department of Wildlife Resources. They have separate committees that form this bear management plan, and they consist of hunters, homeowners, government agencies, the Forest Service, agricultural producers, all of the stakeholders that have something to say about the population of bears within the state. And this plan is actually available for anybody to read on the DWR website. I have to tell you, it's 133 pages long. I tried to read it all, but I didn't get it all done. But it's a very interesting read, and it really gives you the philosophy and what their goals and objectives are. It's a strategic plan. It's not operational, but it's really outlines what their objectives are for maintaining the bear population. And what they do, they don't look at a target number of bears in determining their numbers. What they do is basically set their objectives to either increase the population, decrease the population, or keep it stable. And this plan, as it says, it's a 10-year plan. They do take a look at it every 2 years. But if you look at this across the state of Virginia, almost all of this is in a stabilized situation with just this particular area down here. I think this is Wise, some of the other counties in the far southwest. They've apparently had more bear conflicts, and so they're looking to reduce their population. Okay, I'm going to go over this one a little bit quickly. There's a lot here to cover, but whenever they determine what their population objectives are, they take a look at all of these factors. CCC stands for Cultural Carrying Capacity. And what that means is how many bears on the landscape will people tolerate, okay? BCC, on the other hand, is Biological Carrying Capacity, and that refers to how many bears can the habitat support. The biological carrying capacity is almost always greater than the cultural capacity. There's too many bears in some people's view, and they want to see the population reduced. Obviously, hunting bears is a popular pastime in Virginia, and I never knew this. Maybe some of you that are hunters might have known this, but the picture in the far right are hounds, and many of the hunters use hounds to hunt bear. Did anybody else know that? Did you? Wow. Okay. Well, that was new to me. Anyway, I thought that was interesting, but it's a traditional value to be able to hunt bears and harvest bears in the state. There's also, and this is probably my main interest, is the likelihood of seeing a bear. I was so excited when I saw a bear in my yard, I just went a little crazy. But yeah, people love bears. They want to see bears when they go on a hike. They hope they see them at a distance, of course. But they're a very charismatic species, and people are very interested. Now, this bear up here, I think that person's camera is done for. But they're just amazing animals to me. I'm very much enamored of them. So the last slide that I have on the bear population, what's interesting is it's economically impractical for them to actually capture real numbers, what the population is. I've read for Virginia, it's between 18 and 20,000, but there's really no definitive number that we can give you. What they do is basically use bear harvest trends to determine whether or not the population is growing or not. And with this is actually for the whole state, and this represents the number of bears harvested. So you can see the numbers have gone up from 2001 to 2009. It's been increasing. Now we're basically in a stabilization period. And I did look this up. The number of bears harvested across the state in 2023 was about 2,900. And in the New River Valley, all the counties in the New River Valley, it was 194. Okay. that's all that I have. And I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, who's going to talk about the meat of the program, which is the human-bear conflicts.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. We have these slides of human-bear conflicts, but conflict can be described in a couple ways. Basically, for some people, what constitutes a conflict is different for others. Some people are thrilled to see a bear in their yard, as Carol was, and other people think just seeing a bear is a problem. So it just depends on where you're coming from. But when a bear starts getting into your trash or your bird feed, then it's a conflict. And it can escalate from there. So what we want to talk about is how to prevent the conflicts between bears and humans. So, have you had a bear in your backyard? A lot of us raised our hands. The population has increased in Virginia of people, and because of that, that has increased the number of conflicts. People are moving into the habitats of the bear, and that is why there are conflicts. It's not that the bear is a problem, it's that the humans are a problem. We're taking their space. So we need to be the ones who are dealing with the issues, and especially in urban areas. So what can we do to prevent conflicts with the bears? So with the bears also, there is a helpline that you can call. So on this slide, and these slides will be made available later on, we'll have the phone number and websites. But you can call the Virginia Wildlife Conflict Helpline, and this is a map of where the most calls were from. And so you can see that down here in Southwest Virginia, in our area, we had the second highest number of human bear conflict calls into the DWR. Roanoke had a very high number, and then you can see further north in the valleys, there were a high number of conflicts. So conflicts can occur, especially with garbage, and it can be either a commercial site or a residential site. And then also with bird feeders is another large area of conflict. So the conflict management approach of DWR is what we're doing today, education and outreach. And that is the #1 way to help get the word out. This bear is obviously very flexible, very resourceful. It is on top of the bird feeder and it's going to eat whatever's in there. So DWR has online technical assistance, which is through their website, and warnings about feeding the bears. And then there's also aversive conditioning that you can do. But this is fairly extreme. The first thing that we want to talk to you about is removing the attractants. It's not the bear that's the problem, it's the attractants. So we need to remove the attractants so that they're not coming into people's yards or getting into garbage, either commercial or residential. But when they are coming and they won't stop and you've removed the attractants, but it's still an issue, there are things you can do, such as use a paintball gun carefully, and also electric fencing, and then also buckshot, which in the town of Blacksburg, you can't do it anyway. So just don't do it. And then the very last step, which DWR doesn't like to do, but when people do not remove the attractants, we say a fed bear is a dead bear. So if a bear is coming into an area and people are not removing the attractants, then the last resort is that the bear has to be killed. And lots of people say, not just with bears, but other animals, why don't you just relocate them? Well, first of all, it's illegal in Virginia to relocate wildlife. So wildlife cannot be relocated, period. And the reason is that it doesn't solve the problem of the attractants. The attractants are the problem. So you need to remove the attractants. Because if you remove a bear, another bear is just going to come into the attractant. They're just going to replace themselves, and the problem is still there for the humans. And a bear, if it's removed, can travel hundreds of miles to get back to its natural habitat and range. And so you don't want that to happen because then the bear could be hit by a car and killed. And so then there's other issues. And so that's another reason why wildlife is not relocated. So the bears will just come back to the original site, and they may get killed by other bears as well if you put them in someone else's habitat. So the human influence is the bears can be accustomed to people, and that's not a good thing for a bear. It's a bad thing. So they become food conditioned with people, and then they associate people with the food source. So food conditioning and habituation together then are a very strong positive association, and bears are smart, as Carol said, and they are going to learn this association quickly, and then they're not afraid to approach humans. And when they're not afraid to approach humans, then they're likely to be killed. So unauthorized feeding of bear is illegal in Virginia. I'm not going to read all this to you, but it's illegal, and it's illegal whether you do it intentionally or unintentionally. So if you're doing it unintentionally and you've been warned that the reason it's happening is because you're leaving your garbage out, or you're feeding the birds, or you're feeding stray cats, and you don't remove the attractants, then you are liable to be fined by the DWR, and then other measures could be taken as well. But it is illegal. So if you know you have an attractant and you've been warned to remove it and you don't, you're breaking the law. So we want to keep bears wild. And so that's why this program was developed. It's a Bear Wise program. It's a nationwide program, and Virginia participates in it. And this is what we're doing, is helping DWR get the word out so that people are educated and aware that we need to protect the bears and we need to protect humans. And to do that, we remove the attractants. So you need to remove or secure all potential food sources. That includes garbage, bird feeders. You need to protect vegetable crops and fruits. If you have beehives, you need to protect them. If you have pet food outside, you should only feed your outside pets when they need to eat, and then you need to remove the food, and the food needs to be kept in a secure location. Compost piles can sometimes be an issue, apparently. I've never had an issue with mine. And grills, people don't think about their grills outside. You need to burn off the food or clean the food off, because that will also attract bears. Bears can smell really well. I think black bears can smell food sources from a mile away. Is that right, my bear people? Yeah. So you want to manage and secure your garbage. This is the #1 issue that attracts bears. So the most important thing is to keep your garbage locked up or away from the bears. Okay. So residential garbage is usually the #1 issue that brings the hungry bears in. And once they get habituated to that, they come back and they'll keep looking. So garbage needs to be secured in a building, your garage or a shed, until the morning of the pickup, because bears are out until dawn. They could even be out past dawn, but the garbage should not be placed out until the morning. If you drive around Blacksburg, a lot of garbage is put out the night before, and even though that's legal, it's not wise at all. So for example, I live in an HOA, and we prefer that you not put your garbage out until the morning, but lots of people do. But the last thing you want to do is have to clean up garbage strewn all over your yard and in the street. Plus, it's a bear attractant. So keep your garbage in until the morning before the garbage comes, and you can retrofit your garbage cans. There's things that you can buy. You can see in the upper corner here, this garbage can has been secured. You can also get a garbage bin that has protection from the bears to prevent them from getting in. And then you can also have a little caddy or cart that protects the garbage cans when you don't have them out on the street. Bird feeders. We all love to feed the birds. However, feeding the birds is a huge attractant to the bears. And once they've found your feeder, they're going to come back. So for example, my husband and I stopped feeding the birds with bird feeders probably 3 years ago. We had a bear come in the backyard and it emptied the feeder and broke one of the hanging things on the feeder. And after that, we stopped feeding it. A year later, the bear came back just to check it out to see was it there, and it wasn't. And then since then, they haven't come back. If you're going to have bird feeders out, we recommend that you take them down from April to November, but that's no guarantee that they're not going to come during other time periods. Bears are very resourceful, and they're gonna find the feeders and come back. And then also we recommend you feed your pets, not your bears. So if you do have animals outside, feed them and then bring the food back in. And also water sources can also be something that will attract bears. So you just need to be aware of that. If you have bowls out, it's better to remove the bowls. And you just have to monitor whether your bird baths are attracting them or not. But do not leave food out overnight. Store your pet food in a secure location. And don't leave food on a screened-in porch. You can see in this picture, I mean, a screen is not going to keep a bear off of your porch. Need to also protect crops and orchards. We'll talk more after the presentation about electric fencing if you'd like, but electric fencing is something that the DWR is encouraging people to use to protect their crops and also their animals. So if you have orchards, you should pick the ripe fruit. And if you have an overabundance, like in this picture, you should remove the fallen fruit from the ground. That's attracting not only bears, but deer and other animals. There's also a lot of agricultural damage, and Carol mentioned, agricultural producers are one of the stakeholders, and of course, they want to protect their animals and their crops. So DWR recommends fencing with electric fences to keep them out of crops, also for their animals, but you could also use animal protection such as donkeys, llamas. Trained dogs will protect the livestock as well. No, they're aggressive. Donkeys are very aggressive, and they protect their herd, whether it's cows or sheep or whatever. And the trained dogs also will do that, and then also keep the food stored for those animals. So also aversive conditioning. If you see a bear at your garbage can and you have no choice but to have it outside, keep it secure. But then you can also make noise to try and chase them away. Just don't get close to them. Paintballs, which is less lethal but also dangerous. And then noises and lights, motion detection. If you are a beekeeper, you need to protect your bees because the bears love the larvae and they will tear open a hive to get to them. They can also be fenced with electric fencing, and then there are other ways to protect the hive. We're not going to dive into them, but there are ways, and they need to be protected. So then you might ask, okay, I removed my bird feeders for a couple days, but the bear's still here, it's still coming back. Well, it takes time for the bears to learn that the attractant is gone. So they're going to continue to come back and continue to come back. They'll be checking and they're vigilant because it's easy food for them. So if you just slip up one time, they're going to be back. So that's why we made the decision not to put out bird feeders. We could do a whole nother presentation on native plants. Instead of using bird feeders are for our enjoyment. The birds don't necessarily need them. They're also a huge responsibility. If you're feeding birds with bird feeders, they need to be kept very clean frequently. The old seed needs to be thrown out, not left on the ground. Any seed on the ground is going to attract a bear and other animals as well. So if you slip up once, they'll be back. If you do encounter a bear in your yard, which we have pictures of bears in people's yards, you don't want to run. If you run from a bear, that's going to trigger their senses to run after you. And so do not run if you see a bear. If you do, you just back away slowly and make some noise so the bear knows you're there if it didn't know. So back away slowly, make yourself big, make noise, and back away slowly. So that should alert the bear and the bear should leave. So if you do have a bear in your neighborhood, you want to stay away from them. The bears will find their way out. So you just need to leave it alone and go inside and stay away from it. If it's in a tree, that means it's afraid, and it'll come down once the humans have left the area, and it'll move on. So clear the area, don't chase them, definitely don't corner them. And they'll leave. If they don't leave until nighttime, that's fine. Just leave them alone. And if a crowd occurs, you need to call DWR and they will send law enforcement to keep people away from the bear. Is it an orphan? It's probably not. So just assume it's not unless you see a carcass of the mother nearby. Leave it where it is, or if you do pick it up, which you should never do, then you need to take it back to where it was found. Don't handle a bear cub. For one thing, they're dangerous. They have huge paws and claws from early birth. So if you try to pick up a bear cub, you're going to get clawed and you may get bitten. So contact DWR and don't intervene yourself. True or false, one of the most dangerous encounters in getting a mother black bear and her cubs, getting between them, is the most dangerous thing you can do. Any guesses? True or false? It's false. A mother will send its bear cubs up a tree for protection. So they will send them up a tree, leave them there and go away, and they will come back to get the cubs once it's safe. So if you see bear cubs and a bear, just back away, like we suggested before, and just leave them. She'll send the cubs up a tree or a telephone pole, and they'll stay there until she comes back for them. So the reality is that they'll treat their cubs like I said, and just give them space and retreat slowly, but just leave them alone. So the public can also scare bears with air horns. We're going to talk about bear spray. I actually think it shouldn't be on the list, but anyway, air horns, paintball guns, non-lethal rubber rounds, slingshots, motion sprinklers, lights, alarms. Bear spray is really only used if you are within a very close range of a bear and it is coming at you. You also really ought to have some training about how to use bear spray because the bear spray itself is dangerous. So the only time you would use bear spray is if you were hiking and then you tried to back away and the bear charged you, and then you would spray it directly in the face. It would have to be within 20 to 30 feet of you. And that's really a last resort for anyone who encounters a bear. So you don't use it as a deterrent. It's not something like deer off that you spray around your yard to try and keep the deer away. You don't do that. Bear spray is only used as a last resort in an imminent attack from a bear. So can't read the top even here. Management of bears. Mange. Oh, it's the mange. Okay. So mange is currently confirmed in Virginia in 22 counties, and basically it's a highly contagious skin disease and it's caused by mites. And this is another reason you don't want to have food sources, because the bears can spread it to each other when they encounter each other in food, food sources that are not natural. So mange was first detected in 94 and not detected again until 2014. And people report it when they see it to the Virginia Conflict Helpline. That's helpful for DWR, so they have an idea where it is. And the reports can help track the distribution and spread. Basically, minimizing the spread by eliminating the food attractants. And they're currently researching it and collaborating with other states. There's not a lot that they can do to stop the mange, and the bears seem to be habituating to having it and then it goes away. But they're monitoring it. So for more information, these are some of the sources. You can go to DWR, to their website. You can go to Bearwise. There are practical guides, and we have lots of information up here. Some are handouts that you can take away. And then there's also this hotline number. So if you want, you can enter the hotline number and you have that if you have an issue. But be aware what they're going to tell you is you need to take the attractant away. So even though you think bears are so big, they can be afraid of something as small as a little house cat. Although that little house cat should be inside, which is a whole nother presentation. Okay, now we'll take questions. Carol, you want to come up here too? Carol. Yes. Yeah, I'll leave it there. So if you want to write it down, you can.
If you come up to the table afterward, you can take a
So
look.
Rebecca, in our town community, they're coming and going, but when they go, where are they mostly? In the forest, in our
Well,
area?
they like to be in the forest, but they also like to be on the edge of the forest. And they'll be around farms because there are food sources there too. So they have lots of different places where they roam in their habitat. Basically anywhere can be their habitat. We have not seen a bear or indication in the old growth forest at VT. No. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. The question was, where are they? Where are the bears, especially around urban areas? And they can be just about anywhere. But on the edges, usually on the edges. I mean, they're, beyond the golf course, and then they come in through the golf course into the neighborhoods, that way, and into the neighborhoods from the woods. They have,
Yeah.
Tech does, yeah. Tech has a program, and DWR probably works with them on that.
That mange project is actually being done in conjunction with Virginia Tech.
So the question is about VT and what is their involvement? Liz?
So about hibernation, give information about that, and how do you know when they go into hibernation around here? Our weather
Yeah.
doesn't like stay consistently cold.
Yeah, in our area, bears don't go into true hibernation unless it's a pregnant female. They may be hibernating for a longer period of time and be asleep, what you would think of as asleep. They slow down their heart rate. But in general, they don't do full hibernation like they used to in other areas because it's not necessarily cold enough in Virginia anymore. And also if they're hungry and they've not had a good fall, they're going to come out and look for food. So it's not guaranteed that they're hibernating or that you're not going to see them in the winter. If they want to eat, they're going to come out. The mother bears, on the other hand, they wouldn't be having the babies, as Carol explained, unless they did have enough food to hibernate and have the babies and raise the babies while they're still asleep, hibernating.
So I have a chicken coop with a few chickens in my backyard, and I know a bear has been around there, but it's very well secured and they haven't messed with it. But I'm curious, has there been a lot, do you know if there's been a lot of bear conflicts involving outdoor backyard poultry? Okay, this question's about backyard poultry and has there been a problem in the Blacksburg area? I really don't know. Carol, do you know? Do you know?
I don't think that, in terms of our town, I haven't heard of this.
Okay,
Oh, you Carol Davis.
Carol,
Two encounters of bears going out by goats or encountering goats.
Yeah.
okay, so the answer is,
As they said in the thing, they are opportunistic. And so, I mean, they don't go out everything, chickens, anything can go after chickens for sure.
Yeah.
My chickens are never out of the coop, but it's very well secured, so.
My
I'm just saying, but I
Well,
don't see
you have
evidence
to
of a
understand,
bear walking around.
bear is incredibly strong, so they can just.
Well, that's why I asked the question, because I wanted to know if I still need to worry about it.
Probably, it's not a bad idea, but, Carol Davis with the town said she hasn't heard of conflicts with chickens in town. But someone who lives just outside of town, a mile outside of town, has had encounters with their goats.
And my neighbor's chickens were killed by.
Okay, and someone else's neighbors
Just outside.
just outside the town were killed by the bear. Bears are opportunistic and they're also very strong, as noted, and they can break into a chicken coop if they want to. And the only thing that I think would keep them out would be electric fencing. And they may go after the eggs, they may go after the chickens, they, they can and they'll eat them. Goats, they would probably go after baby goats. So, I mean, any small agricultural animal they would go after. So it's something to be aware of. There was another question back here in the back. Yes.
Yes, we moved to Blacksburg in November, into a neighborhood just about 3/4 of a mile downtown. And all of the houses in our very small neighborhood have wooded areas behind them. So we have probably was a corridor which would be available for bears. And while we haven't met our neighbors yet, because we moved here in November, and hope to soon as the weather gets better, I was curious about the liability issue when you said, if you're providing the source for the bears, then you are held liable. So in a neighborhood situation, should we be finding out from our neighbors, like, have y'all gotten in trouble because you do leave they don't have, not all of the houses have garages to put their trash cans in or to secure them? Should we be asking, have there been any warnings or citations here? And does that make us liable because we did put up a bird feeder for the winter, in the event something happens?
I think you can ask. I don't think you're liable. Oh, I'm sorry. So the question is, they're new to a neighborhood and how liable are they if their neighbors have been unintentionally feeding and been warned? I think that, it should certainly would be great to ask if you're near any woods, then there are bear there and they come into town. So, ask your neighbors. I don't think, I mean, the DWR doesn't really, they don't want to come knock on your door and give you a citation. So I think it's fairly rare. But they will, especially if your neighbors complain. So, I mean, you should talk with your neighbors about it and say, you should look at this program Bear Wise. Have you heard about it? Have you had problems with your trash cans, with feeding? You'll know if a bear comes and takes your feeder because it'll be gone or it'll be demolished. So then you'll know. But we just want to point out, I mean, that DWR doesn't want to fine you, but if you habituate and do it, even though you know that you shouldn't, and you're attracting a bear, then basically you're assigning that bear to death, because if a fed bear is a dead bear, and eventually when the conflict gets bad enough, the DWR has to come in and kill them. That's the only recourse. Does that answer it? Yeah.
I have a question from the chat. What is the likelihood of a bear approaching a toddler in the yard? And if you go ahead and.
Yeah. So what is the likelihood of a bear approaching a toddler in a yard? I think that that would be a better question for DWR. I mean, do people leave their toddlers unattended in the yard? I mean, I didn't, when I had a dog, leave my dog unattended in the yard for that very reason, and because of coyotes. So, I can let Carol.
Well, I was just gonna say, bears are leery of people, We're trying to avoid getting them habituated by having the food attractants. So by their nature, they're not out there to attack us or whatever. They're just trying to survive by getting food. So, I wouldn't, Grizzly bears are a different story here, okay? Black bears are shy animals. They don't really want to have contact with people. So, I mean, I think what you said, Rebecca, is absolutely correct. You don't really want to leave a toddler by itself, outside. In fact, the toddler might do a better job of scaring away a bear than the person, the person would. But I wouldn't fear that. I wouldn't consider that a great risk or a fear. I think the bear, if they saw the toddler running around, they would leave.
It's just unlikely, but
Right.
There's other things that are dangerous for a toddler in a backyard, but yes.
I was wondering about hummingbird feeders.
Mhm.
Are they?
Yes, they can be an attractant. That is the one feeder we put out so far. I just live over here on Kentwood. We haven't had a problem with our hummingbird feeder. Of course, the feeders don't go out until, April, and then they come in 1st of October. There's no guarantee necessarily that they won't be in your hummingbird feeder. I know someone who lives in the country and they put up several hummingbird feeders on their deck. And if they forget to bring them in, the bear just comes and knocks them down and drinks them. So, and that person knows it and they shouldn't be putting them back out, because they know the bear is coming every night looking for either grain feeders or the hummingbird feeders. So you'll know if one comes and takes your, knocks down your hummingbird feeder, but I haven't seen a lot of problems with it where I live. Does anyone else have experience?
Anecdotally, I was in the town of Christiansburg, and the first bear we ever saw was drinking.
Drinking the sugar water, yeah.
Yeah, they'll drink the sugar water. So one person in Christiansburg encountered a bear drinking the hummingbird water. Carol?
If you covered this, apologies, but you all have reached out to me. I had a presentation with some asking for clarification in the town's ordinance
Yeah.
regarding electric fences. So I'm
Yeah.
happy to provide that update.
Would
Can you come up?
please?
Yeah.
Carol's gonna come up. We wondered whether electric fences are legal in Blacksburg proper.
Yeah.
And come over here.
There's
And so Carol's gonna address electric fences.
Yeah, thanks for the folks online. So the presenters had reached out to me and had two specific questions of are electric fences permitted in the town of Blacksburg? And another question about beekeeping in the town. And so I got an answer from the town attorney and the zoning administrator who said that electric fences are only allowed in the rural residential zoning districts, which it pretty much are all on the west side of the bypass in the Toms Creek Basin. And even within those areas, you cannot have an electric fence along a right of way. So a sidewalk, a road, or a path where, for obvious reasons, so somebody could inadvertently get shocked, but you can certainly have that on your property. But I'm not aware of any place in the sort of east of the bypass where most of the town development, I don't think it's possible. So that recommendation from DWR, you'd have to employ other methods. On the question of beekeeping, saying that can be an attractant. We don't currently have any prohibitions anywhere on beekeeping. So that would just be another strategy to employ if you want to keep bees and it becomes a problem. That's something you would need to address. Does that more or less cover?
Carol, can you also talk about the trash can program with Blacksburg?
I cannot.
Okay.
It's out of the Public Works Department. Okay, great.
Okay, fine. Can you?
Yeah.
Bring it up here.
Well, here's the can.
Well, there's the can.
Blacksburg
Uh,
has a program in place.
We're gonna talk about the trash cans that can protect, the trash from the bear.
Don't lose the second piece.
Sorry, a little chaos with the trash can.
It's what?
Kind of smelly.
It's too smelly.
It's all right.
Okay, she's,
I don't think she can see it anyway.
okay, yeah. So
It's okay.
Barb is gonna talk about the trash can.
I have a little bit to say. Morgan from our recycle center brought it in, and they will be ordering with funds from the DWR. And they only have so many that can be bought each season. They haven't made their order yet. So if you want one, you have to go on the town website and go to the bear section. And there will be an application that you fill out. They're around $140, and that is including the matching funds from DWR. They are cans that you can, they stay locked until they stay locked, and the apparatus on the truck actually can pick it up and empty it like a regular trash can. So if you have trouble with making that kind of cash to buy a trash can, there is a way for you to apply for a cheaper can, or maybe even free. And that also is in the application. So just take a look at it. There are lots of neighborhoods that don't have a secure place to put the can. And that's, I think, their first choices are people who do not have a garage. Not that it's too full to keep your can in, but that you do not have any way of securing your can. So those are the folks who get first choice.
I do have a copy of the application.
Carol has a copy here, so if you're here, you can look at it. Yes. I think there are other kinds of cans, but if you're in the town of Blacksburg and you want the can to be opened and used by the pickup truck, you can't just put anything out there. You have to use something that brings us also to the special locks that are on plans that you can put on your can. I was told that they cannot officially tell you that it's allowed, because that would mean that you're altering property that technically is not really yours. It belongs to the town. So, but they work. But you would have to unlock it each time you set it on the street, which then of course puts that responsibility back to not putting it out the night before, but leaving it out or in the, it's secured until morning.
One of the questions we got prior to the program was about composting, and I know that that's one of the things that you asked DWR, and that's where the electrification. But of course, we promote that as an environmental practice.
Right.
So is it just if you see bears, don't do it?
Well, when you read about composting, you're reading that if you stay away from meat products in particular, you're not going to be attracting animals like bears as much. And a compost pile, unless it has, generally, I don't think they can really do a whole lot of damage to your compost pile. Dig around in it like a raccoon does, I guess.
Yes.
Since last fall was for mascot, should we expect more bear activity this spring?
Yeah. Actually, can you repeat that?
Okay, the question is, since last fall was a low mast event, so they didn't have as many acorns and other nuts, should we expect more bear activity this spring? And the answer is yes. So be bear wise. That's okay, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, spring is a very intense, spring is a very intense time of food for the bears anyway, because they're coming out of their dens, they're super hungry, they haven't eaten in months. And so, yeah, right now, you could very well see increased bear activity, which makes it even more important to start securing the trash and removing the attractants.
I don't know if you mentioned it, April through November is when they ask you not to feed bears.
Well, they asked you not to feed them all the time, but yeah,
Like bird feeders.
bird
Okay,
feeders,
November.
April to November, yeah.
Should somebody have a?
Okay,
Somebody-
we're actually at
Oh, yeah, we are,
the end
sorry.
of our time, so we want to thank our speakers. And I think you all
Yeah, we'll stay around.
Okay, so I have one more announcement, actually, sorry, Sustainable Blacksburg has a small grant program, and we're in the middle of our awards for the spring proposals, and we support related programs with a little bit of funding help, and the Master Naturalists actually applied for one of our grants, so we are awarding you the grant that you requested to help provide this bear education. So yes, our treasurer is presenting the check for that. So people here, if you still have questions for them, and online, if you still have questions that didn't get answered, if you want to put those in the chat,